I was treated like a backup until they realized I was the whole engine. The day I quit, nobody believed me. They actually laughed. My manager Trevor said I was being dramatic and should take the weekend to calm down. The CEO's assistant told me good luck finding another job that would tolerate my attitude. I stood in that conference room holding my resignation letter while 12 people stared at me like I'd lost my mind. What they didn't know was that I'd been running almost everything for 3 years while they took credit. Every system they bragged about? I built it. Every client they retained? I managed that relationship. Every crisis they survived? I fixed it at midnight while they slept. But I was just the associate, the quiet one in the corner, the person they called when something broke. They had no idea what was about to happen. I smiled, set my letter on the table, and walked out. By Monday, their world would be on fire. I'd started at Morrison Analytics right out of college 5 years ago. It was a mid-sized consulting firm that helped companies optimize their operations. I was hired as a junior analyst, bottom of the ladder, grateful just to have a job. Trevor was my manager, charismatic and confident. He'd present our team's work to clients with such polish that everyone assumed he was brilliant. What they didn't see was me working until 3 a.m. building the models he'd present. Or how he'd send my reports to clients with his name on them. At first, I thought this was normal. That junior employees did the work while senior people took credit. That's how you paid your dues, right? So I kept my head down and worked harder. Figured eventually someone would notice my contributions. The turning point came during the Brennan manufacturing project in my 3rd year. They were our biggest client, paying $500,000 annually. Their operations were a disaster, losing money in 7 departments. Trevor promised them a complete overhaul in 3 months. After the client meeting, he dumped the entire project on my desk. Said it would be good experience for me. I spent 12 weeks analyzing every aspect of their business, interviewing employees, building new processes, creating implementation plans. I practically lived at their factory. The CEO of Brennan, Richard, got used to seeing me there daily. We'd talk over coffee about his vision for the company. I showed him my analysis and recommendations directly. He loved everything. The implementation was flawless. They saved $2 million in the first year. Trevor presented the Brennan results at our company's annual meeting. Took full credit for the strategy, the analysis, the implementation. Got a standing ovation and a $50,000 bonus. Mentioned me once as someone who helped with data entry. I sat in the back of that room feeling invisible. My colleague Amy squeezed my hand under the table. She knew the truth. Half the office knew the truth. But nobody said anything because that's not how corporate politics worked. You didn't embarrass senior management. You waited your turn. Except my turn never seemed to come. I got a small raise and a certificate of appreciation. Trevor got promoted to senior director. That night I went home and cried angry tears. Then I started planning. If they wanted to treat me like I was replaceable, I'd show them exactly how wrong they were. I started documenting everything. Every project I ran, every client relationship I managed, every process I'd built. I created detailed files with my work product, email trails showing my contributions, even recordings of meetings where Trevor took credit for my ideas. I wasn't sure what I'd do with this documentation, but something told me I'd need it. Meanwhile, I kept working at the same intense pace. Took on more responsibility. Trevor was happy to give it to me. He'd gotten comfortable letting me handle the difficult projects while he focused on golf with clients and presentations to executives. The more successful our team became, the more credit he took. And the more invisible I felt. But I was learning something valuable. I was learning that I didn't need them. They needed me. The Hamilton Tech project confirmed everything. They were a startup that had grown too fast and needed operational structure. The contract was $300,000 for 6 months of work. Trevor sold them on our expertise, then immediately assigned the entire project to me. Again. But this time I did something different. I built relationships with their executive team directly. Made sure they knew I was the lead consultant, that I was designing everything. Their COO, Patricia, was sharp and perceptive. After our third meeting, she pulled me aside and asked why Trevor's name was on the contract when I was doing all the work. I deflected politely, but she'd noticed. That planted a seed in my mind. What if I went out on my own? What if I stopped letting Trevor profit from my work? I started researching how to start a consulting firm. The requirements, the costs, the legal structure. Talked to Amy about it over drinks one night. She'd been working at Morrison for 8 years and was just as frustrated. She handled all the financial analysis that our senior partners took credit for. We both felt like we were running a company that other people owned. She said if I ever left to start something, she'd join me. That conversation changed everything. I wasn't alone in this. Other people saw what was happening and were ready for change. I started reaching out quietly to other colleagues I trusted. Found 4 people who felt the same way. We started meeting for coffee, planning what our own firm could look like. It felt dangerous and exciting and right. The final straw came during the annual review in December. I'd had another exceptional year. Managed 8 major projects, brought in 2 new clients myself, saved the Brennan account when they almost left. I went into Trevor's office expecting a significant promotion, maybe even a junior partnership. He smiled and said I was doing great work. Real asset to the team. Then he told me my raise. 5%. $4,500 annually. I stared at him in disbelief. He'd gotten a $100,000 bonus from the projects I'd run. I'd get $4,500. He said I should be grateful in this economy. That junior people needed to prove themselves before getting big rewards. I was junior. After 5 years. After saving the firm's biggest client. After working weekends and holidays. I thanked him calmly and walked out. That night I registered my business. I called it Apex Operations Consulting. Spent 3 weeks building a website, creating marketing materials, setting up the legal structure. Did everything after work and on weekends. Amy and the 4 others who'd agreed to join me were doing the same thing, preparing in secret. We set a launch date for February 1st, giving us 6 weeks to get everything ready. The hardest part was staying quiet. Pretending everything was normal while planning our exit. Trevor noticed I seemed distracted and asked if everything was okay. I said I was just tired. He patted my shoulder and said not to burn myself out. The irony was breathtaking. He'd been burning me out for 5 years while building his career on my work. In 6 weeks, he'd understand exactly what he'd lost. I timed my resignation for the Thursday before a major client presentation. Morrison was pitching a huge contract to Westfield Industries, potentially $800,000 in revenue. Trevor was presenting on Monday. I'd built the entire proposal, as usual. The analysis, the strategy, the implementation timeline. Everything. On Thursday morning, I printed my resignation letter and walked into the conference room where Trevor and the other senior partners were having their weekly meeting. I handed the letter to Trevor and said my last day would be Friday. The room went silent. Trevor laughed nervously and said I was kidding. I wasn't kidding. He said we'd discuss this privately. I said there was nothing to discuss. I'd accepted a position elsewhere. His face went red. Where was I going? I smiled. I was starting my own firm. The explosion was immediate. Trevor started yelling about non-compete agreements. I calmly pointed out that I'd reviewed my contract with a lawyer and there was no enforceable non-compete. I wasn't stealing clients or proprietary information. I was simply leaving to start my own business, which was my legal right. The CEO, Richard Morrison, was called into the room. He tried the friendly approach. Said I was valuable and they didn't want to lose me. Asked what it would take for me to stay. I looked at him directly and said there was nothing they could offer. I'd spent 5 years being undervalued while other people took credit for my work. I was done. His expression hardened. He said I was making a huge mistake. That I'd never succeed without their resources and reputation. I thanked him for his concern and left. Friday was chaos. Trevor realized the Westfield presentation was Monday and he didn't actually understand the proposal I'd built. He called me 6 times. I didn't answer. He sent increasingly frantic emails asking me to at least brief him on the key points. I responded once. I told him all my work product was in the shared drive, same place it had always been. If he'd bothered to review my work over the years instead of just presenting it, he'd be fine. That email felt better than any bonus ever could. Amy resigned at noon. Then Robert, then Jennifer, then Carlos and Nina. All on the same day. All going to the same place. The office was in complete panic by 2 p.m. Morrison had lost 6 employees in 6 hours. 6 employees who'd been running most of their major projects. The junior staff who nobody paid attention to. The backup players. Except we weren't backup. We were the engine. Monday morning, Apex Operations Consulting officially opened. We'd rented a small office space, nothing fancy, but it was ours. 6 desks, a conference room, a coffee maker. We spent the morning setting up computers and laughing about the chaos we'd left behind. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was Patricia from Hamilton Tech. She'd heard I left Morrison and wanted to know if Apex would be interested in taking over their project. Trevor had called her Friday afternoon saying there would be a transition, and she'd immediately asked for my contact information. She said she'd been working with me, not Morrison. If I was leaving, she wanted to follow. I tried to stay professional but I was screaming inside. Our first client. On our first day. I told her we'd be honored to continue working with Hamilton Tech. She said she'd have contracts ready by Wednesday. By the end of the first week, we had 3 clients. Hamilton Tech, a mid-sized manufacturing company I'd helped 2 years ago, and a startup whose CEO had met me at a conference. Word spread quickly in the industry. The consultant who'd been doing Morrison's best work had gone out on her own. People who'd worked with me directly didn't hesitate. They called, emailed, set up meetings. Meanwhile, Morrison was falling apart. I heard through friends still there that the Westfield presentation had been a disaster. Trevor couldn't answer basic questions about the proposal. Westfield walked. $800,000 in potential revenue, gone. Other clients started asking questions about project continuity. When they learned the actual consultant they'd been working with was gone, several put their contracts on hold. Morrison's stock price dropped 4% in 2 weeks. Trevor called me 3 weeks after I left. His voice was different, smaller somehow. He said they were struggling with the transition. Asked if I'd consider coming back as a senior consultant with a real title and better compensation. I asked what he was offering. He named a salary that was triple what I'd been making. Plus bonuses. Plus partnership track. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I told him my consulting rate. $500 per hour, 20-hour minimum per week. He choked. That was more than he made. I said that was my rate, take it or leave it. He asked me to be reasonable. I laughed. I'd been reasonable for 5 years while he took credit for my work. I was done being reasonable. He hung up angry. I texted Amy and we celebrated with expensive wine. The man who'd dismissed me was now begging for help. The satisfaction was incredible. By month 3, Apex had 12 clients and needed to hire more consultants. We were turning down work because we couldn't handle the volume. The 6 of us were working hard, but it was different now. We owned our success. Every late night meant building something that was ours. Every difficult client was our responsibility and our victory. We hired 3 new people in March, all talented analysts who'd been undervalued at their previous firms. We made sure they knew their worth from day one. Fair compensation, credit for their work, clear path for advancement. We were building the company we'd always wanted to work for. Meanwhile, Morrison lost 2 more major clients. Richard, the Brennan Manufacturing CEO, called me personally. Said Morrison's work had dropped significantly in quality. Asked if Apex could take over. I said yes immediately. Trevor's signature client, the one that built his reputation, was now mine. The industry publication reached out in April. They were doing a story on emerging consulting firms and had heard about Apex's rapid growth. The journalist, Lauren, interviewed all 6 founders. We were honest about why we'd left Morrison. About being undervalued, having our work credited to others, watching less qualified people get promoted over us. We didn't name Trevor specifically, but anyone in the industry would know who we were talking about. The article ran with the headline, "The Great Resignation Hits Consulting, How 6 Junior Analysts Built a Better Firm." It went viral in business circles. We got 50 new inquiries the day it published. My LinkedIn profile views increased by 3,000%. Speaking invitations started coming in. Everything we'd built in secret was suddenly very public. And Morrison looked terrible by comparison. Morrison's leadership reached out through a lawyer in May. They wanted to discuss a possible acquisition of Apex. I almost laughed when I read the email. They'd spent years treating us like disposable junior staff, and now they wanted to buy the company we'd built? I discussed it with the team. We all agreed. Not interested. We weren't building Apex to sell it back to the people who'd undervalued us. We were building something different, something better. I had the lawyer respond with a polite decline. 2 days later, Richard Morrison himself called. He was more direct. Said they'd made mistakes in how they'd managed talent. That they recognized now how valuable we'd been. Asked what it would take for us to consider rejoining in some capacity. I told him nothing. Some bridges, once burned, stay burned. He sounded tired. Said he understood. Wished me luck. I almost felt bad. Almost. By summer, Apex had 25 employees and had outgrown our original office. We moved into a full floor downtown with views of the river. Had a proper conference room, individual offices for partners, and open workspace for analysts. We were doing everything we'd wished Morrison had done. Flexible schedules, profit sharing, transparent promotion criteria. Treating people like they mattered. Our retention rate was perfect. Nobody wanted to leave because everyone felt valued. The culture we'd built was everything corporate America claimed to be but rarely was. News outlets started covering us as an example of how to build a human-centered workplace. Universities invited us to speak to business students. We went from being invisible backup players to being the model everyone studied. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Trevor showed up at our office in August. Just appeared in the lobby asking to see me. I was surprised they let him up, but our receptionist didn't know our history. I considered refusing, but curiosity won. We sat in my office, him looking uncomfortable in the guest chair. He said he wanted to apologize. That he'd been a terrible manager and hadn't appreciated what I'd contributed. That watching Morrison fall apart had made him realize how much I'd been holding together. He looked genuinely remorseful. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I thanked him for coming. Then I said his apology didn't change anything. The damage was done. He'd had 5 years to recognize my value and chose not to. I wasn't angry anymore, just indifferent. He nodded slowly, said he understood, and left. Watching him walk away felt like closing a chapter. Morrison filed for bankruptcy in October. They'd lost too many clients too quickly and couldn't recover. The senior partners had been paying themselves huge bonuses while the infrastructure crumbled. Without the junior staff who'd actually been doing the work, there was nothing holding the firm together. It was sad in a way. 50 employees lost their jobs. But it was also validation. We hadn't been dramatic or ungrateful when we left. We'd been right. The firm had been running on our labor while giving us none of the credit or compensation. When we left, it collapsed. That wasn't our fault. That was their failure to build a sustainable business model. Several Morrison employees reached out asking if Apex was hiring. We brought on 8 of them. The good people who'd been stuck in a bad system. We could give them something better. By the end of our first year, Apex had 40 employees and $3 million in revenue. We'd grown faster than any consulting startup in our region's history. Business schools wanted to study our model. Venture capital firms wanted to invest, though we weren't interested in outside money. We were profitable and growing sustainably. Every founder was making more than we'd ever dreamed of at Morrison, and our junior staff made competitive salaries with real bonuses. We'd proven that you could build a successful business while treating people well. That you didn't have to sacrifice humanity for profit. The satisfaction of proving everyone wrong was incredible. But more than that, we'd built something meaningful. A place where people's contributions were recognized and valued. Where you didn't have to spend years being invisible before someone noticed your work. The keynote invitation came from the National Consulting Conference. They wanted me to speak about building Apex and reimagining workplace culture. It was the biggest stage in our industry. 5,000 attendees. I spent weeks preparing, writing, and rewriting my speech. The day of the presentation, I stood backstage breathing slowly and remembering that conference room where 12 people had laughed at my resignation. They'd treated me like I was nothing, like I was easily replaced. They'd been so confident in their own importance that they couldn't imagine the foundation crumbling without us. I walked onto that stage and told the truth. About being undervalued, about taking credit, about junior staff who run everything while senior people coast. The audience was silent, then applause thundered. People stood. They understood because they'd lived it. Questions after the keynote went for 90 minutes. Person after person sharing their own stories of being treated like backup when they were actually essential. Asking advice on how to advocate for themselves, whether to leave, how to start their own ventures. I was honest with all of them. Leaving wasn't easy. Starting Apex had been terrifying. There were moments I doubted everything. But staying somewhere you're undervalued slowly kills your spirit. Sometimes you have to bet on yourself even when it's scary. After the conference, my inbox flooded with messages. People I'd worked with years ago reaching out to say they'd always known I was the one doing the real work. Headhunters offering ridiculous packages to join other firms. I declined everything. Apex was home. We'd built something special, something worth protecting. Something that proved talent would rise regardless of who tried to suppress it. 2 years after leaving Morrison, I stood in our expanded office during our anniversary celebration. 60 employees now, presence in 3 cities, $7 million in annual revenue. Amy was COO, the other founders all led major practice areas. We'd built something sustainable and good. That morning, I'd gotten an email from a business school student asking if I'd ever doubted my decision to leave. I thought about it carefully before responding. Yes, I doubted it constantly at first. Wondered if I was throwing away security and being foolish. But doubt was part of growth. The real question wasn't whether I doubted, but whether I'd let doubt stop me. I'd been treated like a backup player for years, like someone who was easily replaceable. They'd been wrong. I wasn't the backup. I was the whole engine, the person keeping everything running while others took the credit. Walking away hadn't destroyed my career. It revealed what I'd always been capable of when I stopped accepting less than I deserved. Looking around at what we'd built, at the people thriving here, at the clients who trusted us, I knew we'd made the right choice. Sometimes you have to leave to discover you were never the backup. You were always essential. They just refused to see it until you were gone. And by then, it was too late. You'd already built something better without them. That was the real victory. Not revenge, but proving to yourself that you were always enough. That your worth wasn't determined by people too blind to recognize it. That success was possible, even inevitable, once you stopped waiting for permission to be great. We'd stopped waiting. We'd built our own stage. And we weren't backup players anymore. We never had been.